Hello and welcome. This is Jim Kaufman with Rankin Technical College. So in today's video, we're going to go over, just going to kind of review the remaining assignments, which is basically Lab 0504 and the final project. Then after that, I'll go ahead and do kind of a demonstration on the search requirement that's part of 0504. Hopefully that'll help you out a little bit with that. But I do want to kind of go through the documents for each of those assignments. So let's go ahead and get started with that. Okay. So for Lab 0504, you know, the big thing here is, it's going to work 200 points, so it's another big one. Now, as far as what's in here, so the basically there's pretty much like three different things. Let's see, implement a search engine for users. I should, more than that, but what I'm going to go over is I'm going to go over the search criteria a little bit more in detail. Here is basically just saying, you need to go ahead and have functionality there to create a new bug, right? So you don't have to necessarily call it bug report here. It says available via the route. But basically, you need to have some kind of a button or something on your bug page. So you click it and it'll go ahead and open up, go to another screen or whatever so you can actually enter a new bug. That's the gist of that. I'm going to go ahead and go over here in a little bit. I'm not going to do the one for bugs. I'm going to do the one for users, but you'll have to do the search criteria for both bugs and users. And that one is that. And then also you'll have to display a list of comments on the bug editor page. And be able to post new comments as well. Add a form element to classify bugs. So you can also be able to classify bugs, assign bugs, close. So basically these are just going to be all form elements on that same page, right? So you can do those different functions. And then the last one, okay, and the last one here is the React icons. Now, if you're doing something else, because I know that we kind of, I showed you that zero.dev so that you could, kind of create some of your own screens, and they're a little more complex. Some of them already use icons. It depends on how you went ahead and, create your pages. If you already have some icons, that's fine. If you do not, then go ahead and implement it this way. Okay, if you don't have any icons on your pages yet. But I'm going to go ahead and go over the search criteria for the users here in a minute. But just kind of wanted to go over here quickly. And like the icons right away, that's 20 points right there. So right there, just getting that done, if you already have them on your page, you've got 20 points already. That's going to really help you out. Okay. And the final project here. So the final project is due, and all assignments are due a week from this Sunday on 8/17 at midnight. So no late work will be accepted after that date. Now to go over some of this. So labs for this semester must be operational in the final source code. So here it's talking about Lab 0202 has many requirements that we introduced but could not implement at the time. Okay, so if I go over here and bring up this lab. So this is probably going to be a good one for you to really go through, because this is going to be kind of some of those, some of these areas that we kind of talked about, and not always got implemented correctly, maybe. So, in 2.2, that's where it talks about the different roles: developer, business analyst, quality analyst, project manager, technical manager. right? So you may need to make some changes to your schema, to your validation, to your roles. How, your because you got your roles database, right? Your roles collection. So you need to have that all in order, so you can do all the different functionality, all the like adding things and assigning certain roles can do certain things, right? So you have to make sure that you have that in order. You may have to actually blow away your date, edit your data, or even if it's so much different, you might have to blow it away. Okay, you might have to kind of delete it and start over, depending on how many changes you need to make to get things in order. Okay. Another one that I've kind of noticed on people's work, that the classification. So some people have some different kinds of classification. So really, the basic classification by default, it's going to be, and it's down here on number 12. It's going to be unclassified by default. Okay, so when you create a bug at the beginning, it should be unclassified, and then you're going to have a thing where you can change the classification to approved, unapproved, duplicate. Okay. And edit any bugs. So you kind of need to go through these one by one so you can see, okay, who can edit the bugs. So any user can edit bugs they created, right? So not everybody can edit bugs. So you need to kind of follow this through. Here's the different things. Business analysts can classify bugs. By default, bugs are unclassified. Quality analysts can add test cases. Not everybody can add test cases. Okay, quality analysts can add test cases. Bugs can have multiple test cases. Developers can track the amount of time and hours. Right, that was another thing. So there are some of these things that we kind of, and I was pretty lenient on a lot of these labs, and you didn't necessarily implement all these, but now that we're kind of towards this stage where you're going to have to be able to, do, and I know there's going to be some ones you're going to miss, and it's not going to be perfect. Okay, the important thing on the final project is make sure your screens work, right? Make sure your screens work. Try to implement as much of the functionality that's stated as possible. Okay. But like I said, and if you have the time, I wouldn't make this the highest priority. You probably should go to look at your ERD and update that if necessary. Or actually, you should look at your ERD that you did do and see, because some of them did, some of you did some really good ERDs, and is that actually matching what I have? Okay, so. But, Labo 2, this one here is a good one to really go back and look at because it has a lot of that functionality that's really going to be necessary for this final project. And then a lot of this other stuff is going to be just kind of telling you what it was here. And especially this is 10 points for this, right? So that's significant compared to some of the other, right? So you need to make sure that these other things are also, that you did this correctly. And everybody has some areas that need some adjustment, need some correction, some refactoring, so to speak, right? And really, pay attention. See, and here it refers to 022 Labs requirements there again, right? So that it's going to probably be very beneficial and very helpful for you for this final project to really go back to the Lab 0202, see how you have your data, see if things are kind of aligned so that you can continue forward and be able to get these requirements completed. You want to make sure that all your functionality is available through links, right? Through links at some point or another. Maybe it's going to be, like you're going to add a new bug. You can have that, and you can have that on your navigation if you want. But you can also just have that if you bring up the bugs screen, and then you have a button, say report a bug, add a bug, whatever. Okay. And overall, there's a lot of leniency here, but you pretty much have to get things somewhat close. Okay, you got to get things somewhat close, and the important thing is get your screens working where you can view data, you can update data, you can add data. Right, that's the important part. So let me know if you have any questions about any of this part of it. And this is 60 points out of the 100 is right there. The other 40 points is for doing a video demonstration. So you've all done this, kind of the same thing. Everyone's done this for the C# course, and so I think a couple from the .NET course. So you're already experienced in doing that. I use OBS. That's actually what I use to record all my videos for lectures. I use OBS to record all of them. So that could be beneficial to use that. You don't need to record your face, but so that's optional. But follow this, okay? Follow this. It's going to show you, and we're getting back to the same thing with these roles. So you got kind of 5 different roles, and it's telling you to walk through those. There's 5 points for each one of those, right? So it's important to kind of get that fixed up early on this final project. You don't want to kind of just start adding things for the final project without having kind of the base stuff set up correctly. And then the last part is this bonus. And I'm going to go ahead and create a separate video on this. We did do the G-Cloud deployment. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of do that again with one of the previous students' apps, just to make sure that it works out here on G-Cloud. We really should have, and this is on me because I really should have pushed you guys to make sure. I should have put it as part of every lab to make sure that you push it out there. The biggest things that can cause problems is having, when you access, so let's say you're from your components, you're doing Axios calls. And if in that, when you have that URL in there, if you're using localhost in there, that's going to break those deployments all the time, because localhost is not used, right? Localhost is only on your computer. That localhost of that port is going to be on your computer, right? So you'll have to do that. You'll have to use relative paths for that to work. And I'll go ahead and do a quick video on that. And one other thing I did want to do, also another video. So I'm going to do another video. Besides this, I'm going to do a video on this, on the deployment. But I also want to do a video on maybe just like creating, especially since, you might have to blow away data. I'll do a video on creating some fake data, especially for bugs and that, because, there's a little bit more involved in that. So I'm going to do a quick video on that. Obviously, if you're in good shape with your data, that's, no need to do that. But just in case that, you have to make a lot of adjustments, I don't want to slow you down. So I'm going to kind of create a quick video on kind of generating some fake data for like your bugs, so you can kind of upload that quickly instead of spending a lot of time doing that. I'd rather you spend your time with the coding and the requirements. Okay, so yeah, please let me know if you have any questions. And like I said, it's due on 8/17 by midnight, which is a week from this Sunday. And any other assignment, also any late assignments, anything else also has to be, because I actually have to turn in the grade. I have to grade everything very quickly and have that in on Monday. So that's how that works. And also, it needs to be by midnight. You can't do it like 2 or 3 in the morning. Please have everything submitted by midnight. Okay, the next thing I want to do is go through the search functionality. So as you recall, in our API calls on the back end, basically what's in our root directory, we had these different search criterias, such as keywords, role, max age, min age, sort by. Okay, hope that rings a bell. Here we've got we're using sort by. We're using given name as the default value for that. Okay, and let me just actually show you the screen real quick. And this is just an old student's. This is going to be different than yours. And I hope you actually kind of really maybe spend some time to add a little more functionality than what is here on this. But let me make sure, let me log out and log in here. I gotta find the user I need to use here. All right. Okay. Now, obviously, your things are going to look different, and this is a previous user from a previous, a semester from last year. But on the users here, so he's got this search by keywords, role, max age, min age, sort by, right, and users per page. Okay. So the way this works, here's some users. Okay. Here he's got a next, so that's 5 of them. There's more than 5 users. So this is the way he did the pagination. And so there's your next page, which is just 1 user. But in here, how this is so you've got these 5 things. So we're just going to go ahead and search for Smith. Or we're starting just the first 3, and then it picks up Smith. Okay, we didn't. Now you can do it where you've got a search button. That's fine. Or, the way this one's set up is basically this is happening as you type or change any of these fields, and I'll show you that. But let's see, technical manager. So there's your technical managers. I don't know how many of each. No developer found, huh? Okay, product manager. So here's a product manager, okay? And this is all done. You're not hitting a search bar. This is just done as you change anything on this page, right? Now, obviously, you don't have to do it this way. This is just one option here, okay? So let me get back to the code here. So we have the search criteria. So this is our different state variables, right? Or different side effects, which we're saving the state. And also he has for different pages for pagination state. So he's got set total users, which I don't think he's actually using this, but that's okay. Set total pages, which he's got defaulted 0. Current page is 1. So the current page is always going to be 1. And he has set page size as 5. Okay, not that you would necessarily have to do it this way. Just this is these defaults. You can be doing this in different places, but this will work as well. And also using what's called a debounce timer. And in React, what a debounce timer is, or more generally, it's called like debouncing. It's a technique used to control the frequency at which a function is executed. Okay, and we're going to be using this as part of when we put a value like in that search box, right? We're making calls to the back end as we change it, right? So you can use this debouncing, this debounce timer as a technique to control that a little bit, okay? And it's, to prevent rapidly occurring events. If we have a little bit of a timeout, we're going to slow it down just a little bit so it's not calling that multiple times, too quickly, okay? So instead of executing the function immediately and repeatedly, debounce ensures the function is only called, after a period of a little bit of a period of inactivity. Okay. So we're going to take a look at that too. Okay. So we've got this fetch users based on search criteria. Okay. And I have a lot of logs, right? So the benefits in those logs, and just to kind of review, so this is on our front end, right? So our front end is where whenever we make changes to our front end, we have to do a npm run build. We have to build that thing, right? There are some shortcuts to do that, but you do have to build that when you make changes to that. So that's going to be reflected when you go back to the page, right? If you don't build what's on your front end, you're not going to see it, when you bring it up in a browser. And also, as far as being able to see, what's going on, right, on your page, it's very beneficial to use the console.logs, right? So we're going to just go ahead and go look again at this. So, you need to, this is really, really helpful for you for debugging purposes and everything else. And obviously this is, this one's actually spitting out a lot, maybe a little bit too much actually, but that's okay. We do what we need to do, especially for this class and for these, for this assignment. But search criteria change, fetching users. It's every time you do anything here, and as you can see here on the left, you can see that this thing things are happening as you type things in here, right? Okay, so it's a good idea to print out what you're doing. This is maybe a little bit too much, like I said, but this is printing out everything that's kind of going on, right? And it's very helpful for debugging purposes. I would actually leave yours open, especially the first thing to do if you've got something's not working. If something's not working on your, in your browser for the application, the first thing you got to think, okay, what were you changing? Were you changing the back end? Were you changing the front end? If I change the front end, if something's not working, did I rebuild it? And sometimes actually it will get cached in here also on that front end. Sometimes you need to go ahead and kind of log out, log back in. Maybe even have to close. Sometimes strange things happen. You have to even maybe close the browser and relog in because things do get cached because your front end gets all sent to this front end, right? It gets all sent to that browser. So, that's the first thing you think, when I made changes, it's not reflecting what I think, right? And it's always good. You can also put a console.log, maybe put something different in there so that you can go look, oh yeah, I see it change because I put this in there, right? So, that's like first thing. And like the best thing though is to always have this open so you can see what's going on as you're making changes to your page. Because if there's an error, you'll see it here, right? The first thing you should do is if you ever have an error in a page, you need to do an F12. You need to look at developer tools and look at the console, okay, to make sure that things are working, okay. And the other thing is if you're using local storage, there's different ways to do auth tokens. If you are using local storage, this is another thing you kind of want to watch. Make sure if you're having a problem with your auth token, is it there, okay, etc. But, these developer tools are going to be very beneficial in helping you get these labs and this final project completed. Okay, so to get back here, now we already talked about the debounce timer. Here we're doing this log for fetching users from current page. This is just fetch users, right? Okay, so what we're doing here, and another thing, not to change subjects again, like I said though, for like deploying to like Google Cloud or any cloud provider, You don't want to have localhost in here, huh? You want to really be, you want it to be a relative path because that's what's going to work when you do a deployment. But I did want to go ahead and this is where after our, let's see, our fetch users here. Let's make sure that we got what we need here. Okay. Here we're setting the users. We're setting total users. And this is how we're doing the set the total pages. All right. Now, the important part of the search criteria is this. Okay. We're doing a use effect, right? And so use effect's going to be read on it's going to be read based on when a file, when it's mounted, right? When it's mounted, when it's called the first time, when it's mounted, that's how that kind of works. It's going to go ahead and run that use effect, right? But to control when that thing is read, right? After that, if you have a use effect with nothing here, it's just going to get called over and over and over and over again. It's going to nonstop. It's never going to stop calling use effect anytime something changes all the time. So here we're saying we want to use effect when it's going to get triggered on search inputs, right? On the search inputs, keywords, role, max age, min age, sort by, current page, and page size. Okay, so when these things change, this use effect is going to execute. Okay. And so first it's going to say if debounce timer, clear it out. Okay. And it's going to set a new debounce timer. Okay. And here you can adjust this debounce timer as needed. Right. So this is at 500. If you want it to be a little slower, you can make it 1,000. Right. 1,500 starts being you kind of start waiting for something to happen a little bit, right? 500 is pretty quick, maybe a little more than that. It all depends. We'll go ahead and see how that works here in a bit. And then we're doing this clean up the function. We're clearing the timeout. All right. We're clearing the timeout. All right. And then also down here. So I want to show you this. We have, for all these different search criterias, so here's keywords. We're doing on change. We're used to like on submit or things like that. We're doing it on change, okay? We're doing on change, set keywords. So once you set keywords, right? Once you set keywords, that will trigger keywords, right? Which is up here. Set keywords is going to trigger. So this is your trigger for that use effect to run again, okay? And the same thing for any of these. When any of these change, it's going to go ahead and run that use effect. Okay. So on each one of these, you'll have to, so here's your search by keywords. And then here's your on change for set role. On change, you want to set the max age, set min age on change, each of these. Okay. Now you don't necessarily have to do it this way. This is just one possible way. If you want to just have a button and click submit, you can also do that where you can put in your data, hit submit, and bring back the new ones. This one's just kind of happening on change. Okay. But this is going to make a lot of calls. This is going to make calls to that back end a lot, very quickly. All right. Handle page change. So here's our users per page. This is our page size selectors. This is where on that search box it had, we'll go ahead and take a look at that. It had five, it has, well, we didn't look at it. It has 5 by default, and then you can change it. And we're doing an on change of that. We're changing the page size. And here's your page pagination controls. On click, handle previous page. Right? So that's a button. That's the button. Let's just take another look. So that's the previous button and the next button on the page. The other thing we were looking at previous to that was this one here, 5, 10, 15, 20, right? So on that, let's actually do this real quick. So back up here, we had the page size selector. And so this is, this select here, select statement. And on change, we're doing handle page size change. Here is probably not going to help. It's not going to help because there's not enough users. There's only 5. If you had a lot more users, then it would make a big difference, right? But here it's got previous and next. The previous and next we're calling handle previous page or handle next page, right? So let's go look at that up here. Here's handle next page, which is the next button. So if the current page is less than total pages, set the current page as current page plus 1. Handle page size change here. Handle set page size. Oh, no, that's not the one we wanted. That was handle next. We wanted to handle previous. So we're basically doing the same thing. We're just doing a -1 for previous. For the previous button, right, we're going to do this. For the next button, we're going to do this. All right. Let me see if there's anything else in here. So just to kind of review a little bit, because I know this is a lot. So what we did here, we did the search criteria state. We did, for each thing, we have a state variable. Okay. We have a state variable for each one. And for pagination, we also have some state variables. Total pages, current pages, page size. We also have a state one for our bounce timer, right? Setting this to a null. Okay. And then we, obviously, for fetch users, you want to pass these parms. Don't forget that. Because maybe you might have been just grabbing all the users from the previous lab, but you're going to need to also pass your parms here, okay? And then basically our use effect here. And like I mentioned, so you want to make sure that you have all of your state variables that are related to this use effect, so that if any of these change, then that will go ahead and re-render the page and make a call, right? It's going to make another call and re-render the page. Or the part of the page, I should say. Okay. So real quick here, let me change this. Make a couple quick changes. Let's move this at 500. Yeah, let's see how quick this is. So let's type in Mary. So only return Mary. Very quick, right? So let's change this to say a 1500. Let me save that. Down here on my front end, I'm going to need to do a npm run build. And even though, and it kind of depends on your, people have created things differently on how, what you'll have to do to see the latest code, right? And I think for this one, I needed to make sure I'm logged out and logged back in again here. So let me go ahead and do that real quick. Let me go back to users, and here's our keywords. So before it was really fast. So I'm going to type in Mary now. And as you can see, there's a little bit more of a delay there. And that's not bad. I wouldn't, did that really change? So, and that's another thing that, I kind of like to do too then is, but back to your console.log file, right? You can always put something else in there. And then if this isn't necessarily the best way, but it works. So I'm rebuilding my front end. It should say again, flex users again. And then I need to log out and log back in here, I think. Actually, I think I just do that. Yeah, I failed to get users because it's not logged in. All right. So if I go users, if I do an F12, that's going to help me check this out. So there's your again. So, kind of a little thing you can do, especially if making sure, because sometimes you get confused, you don't necessarily see the, that changes you made being reflected. And so, if you don't see any errors in here and you're trying to figure out, did it really pick that up? It's just one way to do that. There are other ways, but they're a little more complex. So back to that. Let's see how fast or slow that was. And I think that's pretty good. I think that 15, there's a little delay. Yeah, a little bit of delay there. Maybe 1,000 be better, okay? But that's how that works, right? That's how that works, that little timeout there. Okay, it's going to call fetch users based on that timeout, right? So it's very important to have your fetch users there, right, in your use effect to call that fetch users. Don't want to miss that because it ain't going to fetch anything. All right. So that's all I have for that. And please let me know if you have any questions. And if you're having problems with a lab assignment, the final, I can't help you as much. I'm going to try to see if there's some areas that I can kind of guide you guys a little bit here and there. But if you have any problems with your lab, go ahead and check in your code because everybody does things different, and it's kind of really hard for me to diagnose and to debug things just like on a screen share. So please commit your code to GitHub and give me a holler, and I'll go ahead and go out there and take a look. But thanks a lot and have a good day.